Oh, and I finally put my earphones in to reduce feedback.
All right. Well, welcome. We are live here once again for GEO Live number 21. We this month have a couple of guests with us from People's Hub, Lauren Hudson and Evan Casper-Futterman. You guys are going to be doing like a training, as I understand it, or something along those lines. So, yeah, why don't you, Lauren and then Evan, go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us about what you're doing.
Hello, thanks for having us. I'm Lauren. I'm an organizer and a geographer in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm here as part of a few different affiliations that I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, talking about the regional pilot program that Evan and I are facilitating through People's Hub, which is supposed to start in the spring. And we have an open house about the training and about the entire program really on this Wednesday on the 15th, which you can find information about at peopleshub.org. I think that's enough of a brief intro for now. Evan, go ahead.
Cool, thanks. Yeah. Hey, Josh, it's actually funny. I feel like this is actually the first time I've seen you in person after being, in many email communications and getting a bunch of things from, being a GEO subscriber for a long time. So yeah, it's cool to be here. My name's Evan. I work, for the last 5 years, I worked for an organization called the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative in the Bronx. We are now merging with a larger and older community organization, the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition. And so I will be a staff person at that organization, which has a 50-year history in the Bronx, starting basically this month. I also have been a PhD student and researcher. I got my PhD also studying this kind of development, economic democracy and community and economic development. I've taught a bunch of places, and I've been organizing and working and thinking and strategizing with Lauren in New York City for maybe a decade plus, like more than that, maybe 2012, something like that. This workshop that we're talking about and this pilot series through People's Hub is sort of like not a culmination because it's not an end point, but like a body of work and thinking that Lauren, not just Lauren and I, but a group of folks have been thinking about in Solidarity Economy organizing for, the last decade and a half of where, it's relatively young still in the United States and how to think about this work in this particular era. And so this is our latest iteration of how we think groups can strategize together to build Solidarity Economy in their place.
Great. So, I just had pulled up here the People's Hub website, and it's got the information for this. So it looks like you're having an open house just day after tomorrow then. And you want to you want to go into a little bit more into depth, I guess, about what your idea is with behind the training or what's going to go on at the open house maybe tomorrow or on Wednesday rather.
Sure, I can start a little. So the idea for this pilot stems from a few different needs. There is a lot of training in a solidarity economy space that's either 101 specific or is specific towards cooperative development, which itself can be an often like myopic view of solidarity economy work. And what we've noticed, Evan and I and the others that we work with and organize alongside and participating in different kinds of networks and associations, is an emphasis on a proliferation of a particular cooperative model or a proliferation of models per se, right? That the strength of our movements lives and dies on just how many different things or entities that we can create. And that's all well and good. But there's a lot that's missing from that kind of orientation, which is the political analysis that is shared between people. We talk a lot in the Solidarity Economy Principles Project, which is the collective that I'm from, about having shared values and shared principles and then developing a methodology out of those things. So it's all nice to say, we should all, like, Solidarity Economy has X amount of values like mutualism and justice, and then leading a trading on either of those two things. And you're left from that trading being like, okay, how do I apply mutualism and justice to the thing that I'm doing? How do I evaluate if it works well? How do I hold myself and others accountable? How do I link that with other things that are embedded in my area? So this training incorporates a lot of different elements from different trainings, one of which is CENIC, that's the Cooperative Economic Alliance of New York City's Cooperative Leadership Intensive, and the other is Mapping Our Futures, which is a People's Hub and Highlander kind of programming there, and others as well. And so we're hoping to unite that shared political analysis with developing a shared methodology that is crucially grounded in place, like place as an analysis, so that when we talk about linking these things together, that becomes much more iterative, right? How do we essentially create I want to say like a rule of thumb maybe, but a shared kind of knowledge about how you develop regional organizing in a solidarity economy space beyond make a lot of co-ops and preserve a lot of gardens and make a lot of different housing associations and just hope that they talk to each other. But this is really for groups that are operating with a regional perspective and want to create value chains out of those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I've really too much to add to that. I think the reason we went with an open house was to try and clarify. I mean, I can talk a little bit more about the kind of lineage behind this, but I think the open house goal was to sort of clarify how this series would be designed and who the audience, ideal audience and groups would be for, so that it wasn't confused as another round of like Solidarity Economy 101 or other things that we've seen proliferate. And I think what we started to see too is like as the age trajectory, the age of the work and movement and certain collectives and cohorts think develop to a point where they have some strategic capacity or thinking and some legacy of organizing and background behind them, the 101 isn't really more of what they need, or they have the capacity to do their own 101s. They don't need some other group to do it for them. It's about how do we improve upon this? And so one of the things that we're trying to think of, as Laura was saying, is how to develop an understanding of a methodology of solidarity economy organizing and introducing or deepening an analysis of place and community as part of that lens, as even sort of community economies. Talking about the economy can often get very abstract and removed from place, even when we're in the context of building solidarity economies and community economies. And so coming from the geography and an urban planning perspective, respectively, right? I have an urban planning background, Lauren, a geography PhD. And so those pieces of it kind of inflect and inform this orientation, as well as to thinking about, right, not just the, as Lauren is saying, not just the entities or just the political projects. So we see a lot of sort of like entity mapping, or, you know, oh, public banks are important, worker co-ops are important, participatory budgeting. So there's been a lot of reference in the last decade or so to like the things you can do to embody these values or enact them in your place. And again, like those are important, you know, reflections of these values. There's also this other thing, which is that could take for granted that they somehow do more than like are greater than the sum of the parts. And also that having an idea about what the entities are doesn't necessarily get you. I think the other thing that Lauren mentioned, which is really critical, is this like sense of assessment of like, what do we have and how do we improve upon it? So you could build these things and they could not serve the purpose that they're meant to serve. And then there's this sort of question of atrophy and organizational decay that we know co-ops are subject to, as are nonprofits, as are any organization is subject to degradation over time. So you could have legacy organizations that are really great, but aren't really serving their purpose in the ecosystem anymore. And so over the last few years, we've heard and seen a lot of proliferation of discussion of ecosystems and how ecosystems are so important for solidarity economy, how infrastructure is so important for solidarity economy. Those are not developments to be taken lightly. But then the next question is, okay, so how do you assemble all of these things together to think about the intersection of place and economics and institution building and infrastructure and ecosystem. How do these things all fit together? And so our goal with this was to focus for a pilot on one place, a group of people from one region, wherever that may be from in the application process, and go deeper with them on their assessment process, their strategic capacity for their place. What do they have? What are they missing? And support them to go through something that helps them map both geographically and politically the direction that they want to go in. And so that's sort of the idea here, is that we're putting these pieces together, showing how they can all come together as part of a broader methodology for solidarity economy organizing that ideally can be then revisited, right? If you have the skill and the technique as the cohort, you don't need to keep coming back to People's Hub to like learn each piece of the puzzle again and over again. So that's sort of part of the idea here, is going beyond like learning about the elements of a solidarity economy ecosystem to how groups can use them, strategize around them to put them together effectively.
Yeah, that's really great, and I'm real pleased to see anybody and you guys especially who we already know doing this kind of work and thinking about these kind of things and actually trying to because as I here pulled up, let me see, can I put this up here? GEO back in whenever this was 2015, so you can see this is 9 years ago, we did the Advancing the Development of Worker Cooperatives, which was a little one-day kind of mini conference that we used to do before the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy. And that 1 year that we 2015, our topic was exactly on this thing, because we had been involved very deeply with the founding of the U.S. Federation, as a national organization. But we had really seen even then, 10 years ago, I guess now, that there was a lot of focus on national level stuff at the time. And it seemed like a lot of the really good work was being done on regional and local levels. But there weren't many people really talking about the people who were doing it, were doing it, but we weren't seeing it spread as much. So it's really great to see this kind of thing coming about, because I think you're right on the right track. What we need is the connections between all our groups, right?
Yeah, and I would also say I think the causal or the direction of correlation or causation I think actually goes in both directions, because 2015 I'm pretty sure I was at that conference, the one you're talking about, and it was a year before Scenic was officially launched and founded. So I think that was also that conference played a role in the development at that time. The strategy and thinking, the advocacy and organizing that was happening at that time was seeing how to do local chapter or affiliate-based organizing at that time through the National Cooperative Business Association. I think was like one of the strategies that local affiliates were pursuing was, can we get NCBA to seed local chapter affiliates essentially and staff local organizing affiliates? And so Scenic was founded in that moment. I think the first board elections for the Cooperative Economics Alliance in New York City was 2016. And so that at that time, that thinking was like, let's build some regional and local affiliates to do this work in place in community. And so a lot of the learning and the reason for this comes out of basically the last decade of like, so how's it been going so far? And there are other challenges that this training aren't meant to necessarily directly address. Like one of the big challenges remains, of course, fundraising and the sort of economic resilience of these networks, which is not directly something we're trying to address, at least not the fundraising component, but it is about building economic and political power. And so the goal we have with this training is to make sure that if your cohort or collective is like super sharp on its politics and political analysis, to sort of not forget or leave behind that solidarity economy organizing has to be deeply grounded in like a revenue generation, surplus generation model that allows you to sustain yourself, because otherwise it becomes a philanthropic endeavor. And you can have individual organizations that are nonprofits or that don't always generate a surplus or that run off of other forms of currency and labor value. But like if your network isn't able to sustain itself economically through a diversity of revenue generation sources, like that's the other thing we're also trying to get groups to address as well. And then we have the other one that Lauren, I think, was also alluding to, which is like, we have groups that are sort of more oriented towards the business development orientation or cooperative development orientation of quote unquote solidarity economy or social economy, where the goal is to develop cooperative businesses, usually through a nonprofit incubator or something like that. And they're designed to be functional or profitable in a way that most traditional enterprises are. and they lose track of more of the political analysis of the transformation and the network proliferation. That's a key piece of solidarity economy organizing as well. And so the goal here is to make sure that the place-based organizing that we're supporting, or the cohort that we develop and work with, is oriented strongly to both of those pieces, because that's really the intersection that, for a variety of reasons in the United States, we see missing. Is like, we have a really individualist political culture, we have a hyper-capitalist, hyper-competitive economic culture. All of those things inhibit the growth and development of the types of work that we're talking about.
Lauren, gonna put you on the spot here. What kind of groups do you think are going to be interested in this? I assume you have some people signed up or already. So tell us a little bit about the people who are already on board.
Well, I mean, they're on board to go to an open house. I don't know, maybe after. Let's wait for those applications to roll in and see how on board they are. I hope they remain so, but we do have about 60 different people signed up just for the open house, which is pretty great, which just goes to show, I mean, not to like super tutor on horns, but does go to show that there is a strong desire to think about these things for a sustained amount of time versus thinking about these things in a pretty itemized way, or let's go to a training to pick up a particular kind of skill and then just leave with that skill and apply it, like lodge it into something else. There is a desire to think about these, all of the things that Evan has mentioned, as things in relationship to one another. So the groups then that are ideally suited for this are the ones that are already doing some kind of cross-sectoral and cross-pollination work that is happening at and I know it's a relative term, but at a regional scale here. So it is not necessarily ideal for those groups that are working, let's say, in a specific like incubator space of one particular model. And that is just the proliferation of that model, and the landscape that it's embedded in doesn't really matter so much as all of those kind of hard business skills needed to develop it. We're thinking about groups that are either already embedded or deeply interested in being in better relationship to the existing organizing history of their area, and understanding that through a solidarity economy lens, and want to take that work to the next step by building essentially like value chains across those relationships. So in a certain way, it feels like a needle in a haystack kind of thing, but I think a kind of important part of this, right? Because you mentioned the relationship between the national and the local here, and the directionality of that is really important, because the kind of organizing ethos we're moving with, right, is building from people's experience that's happening at a local level, and then whatever rises to the top is like great. If that scales up to shifting our national principles in some way with our kind of like national networks and affiliations, amazing. But it is not that, taking the wisdom of what's happening nationally and downloading it on to what is happening locally, or having it be directed by a national scale onto the local. We're very much doing this, trying to avoid saying grassroots. I know we say it a lot, but we could all say
the name.
I know. Sorry, you're right. I only like it when we're talking about GEO.
It does get used a lot. So
yeah, it's a thing, right? And then we forget what that means. We think like, oh, if we have, if we're a network that just has a lot of chapters, then yes, that is grassroots. And it's like, well, how are the values flowing? How's that money flowing? Who are taking directives from whom? How are your board directors functioning in a way that represents that truly? We get into a lot of like sticky spaces when we kind of take that relationship for granted. And I know that Rebecca Kemble wrote that fantastic article about that same process for GEO not too long ago. Those things have material consequences when we overlook them, and they really can sour us on our relationships to one another as well when we mishandle them.
So I guess to maybe put a little finer point on my question, or what I was trying to get at is, are the types of groups that you're getting or hoping to get for this workshop or training or whatever we're calling it, are they specifically like cooperative groups or who have like solidarity economy kind of already in their name, or is this a little, are you looking broader to like maybe environmental groups or labor groups, like union type people, that sort of thing?
Right. So we're thinking specifically to people that are oriented in the solidarity economy framework here. They don't have to have solidarity economy in the name, but they have to have that as their analysis or their approach to their work. So because those can be, let's say, networks or affiliations of multiple different kinds of things, then there's a really broad net that you can get into, which I also think contributes to why we have so many signups for this, is because we have people from other kind of organizing corners, like the mutual aid space, for example, or things with a particular climate justice focus, but are oriented in a solidarity economy way as well. So we're getting broad that way, but solidarity economy work does have to be the place where they're grounded.
Right.
Yeah. And I would just say too, that I think one of the things why also having an open house for this is particularly useful is to clarify some of these questions, because our orientation with this is that the cohort that is assembled as the chosen for this, for the pilot, likely have some existing tethering, not likely, will have some pre-existing connections. This is going to be like thrown together. Oh, just because you're all in the greater area of each, the greater metropolitan, whatever region you're in, then you're all just going to get thrown together. It'll be an intentionally designed one, but so they'll have some pre-existing relationship, but the discretion of who they're submitting in as part of that group to be as part of whatever you want to call this steering committee, this cohort of whatever that they're shaping and forming to go through this 5-month process, could be representatives from labor cooperatives, credit unions, right? They could be from a variety, mutual aid gardens, et cetera. So the representative org is or the affiliation is less important than like they see clearly their path to collaborating, and the vision that they have is to do this sort of weaving activity, this deeper place-based analysis for their region, and develop some thinking about where, for assessment for themselves, of like, where's our region at? Where do we want to go? How do we want to develop solidarity economy for our place? And so, yeah, they can be reflective of any different type. And so it won't be one organization that goes through this. It'll almost certainly 100% be 8 to 15 people who come from different organizations actually, and are working together to form, either they exist already as some named group or network entity, or they're trying to form one, and that this process will help them do that and create something that is new, a new network of some kind.
It's great. I think it's very useful to be doing this kind of stuff. I can't remember, it's probably been just about 10 years ago, there was some political realignment up in Canada, and a lot of their kind of movement organizations lost funding that they were getting from the government, and in some places in Canada caused massive upheaval, and just like a whole lot of organizations went under. And then other places, Quebec, go figure, not a problem. And I was talking to some folks and at one some Canadian folks at one of the conferences I was at, and then reading some stuff subsequently about it. And one of the big takeaways was that in the regions that didn't, that survived that kind of loss of funding from the federal government there really well, was that they had really dense networks, not just of co-ops and credit unions and people who are kind of already in the co-op space, but also with all the different environmental organizations, food banks and stuff that we wouldn't necessarily think of as being kind of all under one umbrella for in any kind of particular movement, but that's what allowed them to find funding from other sources and just to have never had to depend on the kind of government funding to begin with. So that was a big takeaway, I think. So yeah, so great that you guys are working on this. I see on the website that you do have multiple time zones listed. So this isn't, while this is, you're focused on regional organizing, this isn't just for folks in any particular area of the country. And this is all going to be online, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we've seen, I don't know, I'll probably leave. I don't want to get into a shout out game and miss a bunch of regions that then are going to show up to the open house and get pissed off. But like, yeah, I've seen all kinds of reflective, places from the Northeast where I'm based, but I've seen California, Twin Cities, Gulf South, North Carolina, Mid Atlantic. So yeah, I've seen a lot of So I was excited to see the level of interest and the diversity, right? I think that's also been my own kind of pre-existing bias, also just where my relationships have been in doing this work. Is I was like, oh, what if we end up getting a lot of interest, but it's just from people we already know, like people from the Northeast, and the interest has been really strong. I think that's really important.
Great. Hopefully you'll get a lot of people to show up at the open house. Should put the link in the chat for our viewers on YouTube. So if you're watching and you would like to find out about regional solidarity economy organizing, or know somebody who would, link is in the chat there. Chris, do you have any thoughts on what you have heard so far? Any questions for our guests?
I was just thinking about how I'm kind of curious if any stats are going to be collected from this, and if any are going to be published, because I'm curious to know who's going to show up. I know that locally, a lot of friends of mine and I we've had to abstain from even a lot of citywide stuff, because it kind of destroys our internal consensus, and it's very hard to we're not there yet for a lot of things. And even statements, I kind of noticed that when there's statements that are being passed around where they're trying to get different orgs to sign on and stuff, I always notice that the quickest orgs to sign up, I have an idea of their internal organization. That's not a democratic org. That's why they can sign on so fast. And it's so hard to get any orgs that I'm in to sign on to something, because usually by the time we can talk about it, the deadline has passed. And so I guess I'm just thinking about how it's just so hard for groups that practice consensus to organize, on bigger scales. And we've had some tough calls where we're man, we love meeting up with these people, but we're losing all the time that we need to reach consensus on this other important stuff. But that's all that comes to mind right now.
That is so good. And what a great gossip potential that is. So I'm I want to know so much now. But yeah, this participating in a pilot like this requires, and we are building in this assumption, a certain level of coordination, agreements on the agreements of the scale of which you operate on, right? So different than stepping into maybe a regional or place-based coalition kind of network for a particular campaign, and more so our lens is here, where it used to be maybe more granular, or we've always wanted to organize at a particular scale, and we need to figure out how to actually weave those relationships together, and we're going to dedicate this time to do that. So yeah, that's what we were kind of saying, it's a niche area, but a needed area, right?
Yeah. And I think that, Chris, listening to you talk, I just kind of was statements. I mean, they're, I'm not I guess they're important. People like to make statements, but I think personally what is probably, better for actually building these kind of bonds locally is just finding ways to work together. And that was, again, to, reference this kind of poorly remembered papers I read about what was going on up in Canada, is that, that it wasn't, necessarily, in the regions where they had good, thick, networks, it wasn't that they were all going to the same protests or something like this, or they'd all signed on to the same, public letter. It was that they had lots of like kind of business and organizational relationships, just doing things together, kind of in pairs or whatever, not necessarily all at once, but just when everybody, it's like you need something printed, you go to the printing co-op, you kind of, they had, kind of built out this network of people who all shared kind of a basic worldview, who all, were there to support each other. But sometimes I think that, trying to, I don't know, make statements and wordsmith stuff in large groups of people, I think can often be, kind of a trap. And I mean, it's often important. I don't want to say, it's not to like, have good documentation and stuff like that, but
well, and
yeah.
And just before I got to jump off early, unfortunately. I feel like we're like starting to get into some of the juicy, as Lauren is saying, into the gossip stuff. It's always like a lot of fun. My thing, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler alert for our for the cohort. But one of the things, and this speaks explicitly, I think, to something that you're both talking about right now, which is like the goal or one of the endpoints of the cohort program is a sort of public sharing or presentation of the work that this cohort will have been doing over the work of the 5 months of the process. And we're intentionally hoping to design that around building the kind of community, Josh, that you're talking about, right? Where relationships can, and that it's over the course of 5 months. So there's time to plan it and reach out to people and have those one-on-ones that help build, some understanding of where the group is trying to go, so that they can see it as part of their organizing process, so that it's not just, we're going to learn this stuff and work on this thing internally and help ourselves build this coherence internally. But then there's this moment where they can bring in a broader community and use it as a network growth or a community building opportunity as well. It will still be virtual. Obviously, if they want to do something in person, they could invite me and Lauren to the thing. We may not be able to go depending on where it is, but like, right, that the idea of that building in place and building the networks in place is that those relationships are critical, they're enduring, and they help build in either redundancy or new moments of opportunity and alliances that can sustain over time in place. And so we hope that that's part of it too, is that it isn't just this learning thing where you get a bunch of worksheets and then like go off into your thing and keep them in a folder or whatever, that like it's a moment then to also engage and broaden the tent in wherever this pilot takes place as well.
Yeah, and so people who come to this program and participate, is the idea that they are going to go found like formal organizations, or is this also geared towards like building more kind of informal networks as well? What's kind of like what's your hoped for endpoint, I guess, for your?
I mean, my dream is that there's some kind of like value chain relationship that is created or strengthened through this process. So whether that's some capital F formal thing, or whether it is, I almost want to say like the cultural aspect of their work, where it seems more iterative and immediate, that this is now how we organize. The value chains are a big part of that. And going back to what we had originally said, like creating an actual organizing methodology, of which place is very, very crucial, and interlinking relationships, political and economic relationships, is core and feels like more accessible to people in their organizing, is the point and is the dream. But it's still a pilot, so we might have new dreams after that. We might cry. Who knows? I think it'll be good.
Okay, so I think let me take you out of the spotlight there, Lauren. I think we're at the end of the time that you guys have for us today. It's been great having you here to talk to us. If there's any parting words you would like to leave us with before you take off, now is your chance. No.
What? We'll
All
see you
right.
Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I hope that we can, the group that goes that does the cohort can share back and present when they finish.
Yes,
And
for
they'll
sure.
come on and talk about their experience and learning, and it won't be us talking about what it might be like. It'll be them talking about what it was like.
Yeah, we would love that. So
Yeah.
for sure, get us more guests.
That would be such a cool guess. An episode. Yeah. Sorry, just thinking about it.
Think about it. All right.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been great. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Right.
Yeah, there we are. So, Chris, you've as we were saying, I don't think we need to keep going super long. I don't know if you have anything in particular you want to talk about. I am just feeling the need to give a little PSA for our two viewers. Chris is sick.
Yeah.
One of our guests, I won't say who, also told us they were feeling under the weather. Wear a mask, people. N95, the 3M auras, they're great if you can get them. And they will stop you from getting sick a lot. I can personally attest to that. Hung out with somebody who turned out to have COVID in a close situation, talking with them for quite a while. This was like 2021 when people were still wearing masks, and I didn't get the COVID. So anyway, I think especially with the bird flu and now Mpox, if you're flying somewhere, I think wearing a mask is a good idea. I'm just saying that's my PSA.
Nice.
Yeah. So, well, if you don't have anything to add, I think we can call it an evening.
Cool. Yeah.
All right.
Under other circumstances, I know I'd be like, "Oh, we got 20 minutes. Let's talk about this." But my brain is not even going there.
Yeah, no, I can tell, and I'm kind of not feeling it either. I still like I feel kind of recovering a little bit from the holidays, even though it's not like I do them up particularly big or anything. It's just like there's something about the new year that's kind of off-putting. Takes a little bit to get into the groove. So
yeah, someone texted me. I was talking about this earlier today. Someone texted me about something, and then kind of ended by they sent a follow-up text and said, "Oh yeah, Happy New Year, I guess."
I know. I said that to somebody like a couple of days ago. I was in a store or something. I just said like, "Oh, Happy New Year" to the person, and I just thought like, wait a minute, is it too late? And did I miss that window? I don't know. It's like the 8th or something now. Is that how long do we keep
now
saying
it's a
that?
Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. What's the cutoff?
Right, exactly. What's the cutoff for the Happy New Year? Yeah.
I'm gonna
well,
Google that right now.
I've yeah. I've have some spicy thoughts I could share on solidarity economy. I think it actually gets used more. The term gets used more than it's merited, than it's warranted. I don't know. To me, and I know I
Which
told
term?
you this before, solidarity economy, just solidarity in general, but specifically when we're talking about solidarity economics. Yeah, but that's a topic for another day. I need to be in a little different headspace. And we lost both our viewers, so we should just wrap it up, call it an evening.
Yeah, and there
So
was a
what's the cutoff?
conversation in the listserv, in the
Mhm.
one of the GEO listservs where people were talking about not using solidarity economy and like doing something else. I don't know if you remember that chat, but maybe for the next one.
Yeah, we'll have to dig it up. All right. With that, we will say see you next month.